Hello, everyone, and welcome to Snap Take. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official podcast of Marvel Snap Zone. And today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the new Marvel Snap game mode, High Voltage. We've got top decks from an absolute ton of top players, and so much more. We're going to timestamp the crap out of this video, so if you know any of these sections, feel free to skip ahead. So the first two sections are sort of our introduction. It answers the questions of what is High Voltage for anyone who's not clear, and then we go over banned cards and locations. You don't want to miss number 3, though. Number 3 is the expected energy you can have on each turn of the game, the average and max. So that's going to be really useful information. Then we've got 10 decks from top players and an 11th deck from me personally. Then a list of cards that get better and worse in this mode. And we're going to then review Agony and do a full deck guide for an Agony deck that I'm excited to try once I unlock this in high voltage mode. All right, so what is high voltage? And again, feel free to skip right ahead to the energy charts if you know this stuff. So it is a mode that has 3 turns with no snaps. You start with 2 cards and draw 2 per round, which means you're starting with 2 and then you're drawing 6 more cards for a total of 8 that you're going to see throughout the course of the game. That leaves 4 cards left in your deck at the end of the game. Worth knowing, right? There are ways, obviously, to draw extra cards. High Crystal, High Atom Warlock, so on and so forth, and which will let you see more. And there are ways to stop draws, or at least to complicate draws. We'll talk more about that soon. Each turn, players get the same amount of randomized energy, 2 through 5, and that energy is going to compound. So let's say you get 5 energy on turn 1, right? You just start with 5 energy. Turn 2, you can get 2 more energy. So you would have 7 energy total turn 2, etc., etc. You can get 2 on both turn 1 and turn 2 for a grand total of 4 energy on turn 2. And there's just a million different combinations in this manner. This is for now the only way to get Agony, who will be a Series 4 card released into the token shop on Halloween. But get the card for free if it is doable. We're going to review her at the end of the video, talk about what her abilities are and what her value is. We're going to take a look at the mode, the banned cards, and then Code and Goa, who is on Twitter at SnapSnapRetreat, has the energy math for us. So this is what the mode is going to look like. And again, if this is already in your game, feel free to skip ahead. But this is what the mode is going to look at as per the second dinner article. We can see what games are going to look like, where it's telling you how much energy you're getting, even telling you the next turn amount of energy, right? Plus, we've got the what the high voltage is, which seems like it's going to have its own specific missions, not just win games, where you do your high voltage specific missions, and in doing so, you can get to unlocking different stuff like credits and Agony and so on. And then, of course, high voltage will be found in the same general spot of your game as conquest and friendly battles. Cool. All right, so the high voltage bans. Thank you to Terabang for compiling this, and Terabang runs the Twitter Marvel Snap community. The 3 banned cards are Magic, Galactus, and Black Widow. All 3 make perfect sense. Magic would extend the game, which defeats the whole purpose of the mode. Black Widow says one of your 3 draws is gone, which means -2 cards in 3 turns, and that's obviously insanely overpowered, especially because you could copy it with other cards. And then Galactus obviously completely would change the mode and turn it into a who can get bigger in one lane thing. Turn 1 Galactus does not seem especially fun to anyone and sort of limits how we would do things. I'm not going to read you through this list of banned locations, but there are an absolute ton of banned locations. Most of the ones that limit where you play are banned. I'm going to shout out stuff like Death's Domain and so on, and Sanctum Sanctorum as banned cards. In addition, stuff that gives opponents your cards, like Oscorp Tower, are banned. The Kiln would do nothing in a 3-turn game, so on and so forth. TVA would do nothing. So there's a lot of locations that are specific to doing things on later turns of the game or extremely limiting on play, which just don't exist in this mode. So it is worth knowing that they won't be there. You don't actually have to worry about them. All right, the energy charts. So this is how much energy you will get in an average game of high voltage. Okay, my wife decided to cook something at an awkward time. All 64 possible combinations of energy are shown here. High voltage averages the same amount of energy in normal Snap, but this is important. Even if it does average the same amount of energy, it's doing so in 3 turns, giving you far more energy per turn than a standard game of Snap. Around 9% of games will have exactly 21 energy, i.e. the energy in a regular game of Snap. That's still not a ton. That's about 1 in every 10 games, right? 69% of games will range from 17 to 25 total energy. So if you're looking at a total energy spent as you build your deck, that's where you start. And again, thanks to Code and Goa for this amazing information. Let's look at the second turn of high voltage. So second turn averages 7 energy. 1 in 4 games you can high roll and just play Sarah on turn 1, which is awesome. 25% of Sarah on turn 1, and even Sarah on turn 2 seems like it's going to be extremely strong. Most normal turn 5 plays are doable at the end of turn 2 of high voltage. So you can almost guarantee yourself that you can play a 5. There's only one specific situation where you're going to go 2 energy, have 4, and then not be able to play a 5 on turn 2, right? The question becomes who can show enough restraint to balance priority for the final turn, because well, there's going to be a lot of power to gaining and throwing priority. Allieth and Shang-Chi, obviously both being cards in Marvel Snap. Can you afford to throw priority and still beat Allieth? Can you afford to throw a priority and think if they don't have Allieth, if their specific type of deck isn't running Allieth, you can get chunked. So there's a lot of stuff to think about there. And then we go into the final turn, turn 3, and you're going to get half your total energy at this point, basically because it's compounded. So you've got just an absolute huge energy amount on that last turn. This is going to be the big showdown with lots of RNG, and most plays are going to be revealed simultaneously on the final turn, and you're just sort of going to be left to guesswork. You have to sort of guess what your opponent has. Are they going to leader you, or are they going to lie with you? Are they going to Magneto you? Or are they going to play some weird combination thereof? So these games, however, are going to be very short. So I think a lot of the skill is going to end up being in deck building and less in playing than in a traditional game Marvel Snap. But I think that's a fairly interesting place to be. Again, you can take a look at this chart yourself about how much energy you are likely to have on the final turn of the game. Hey, if you're willing to hit that sub button, we're trying to hit 15,000 subs by the end of the year. We're almost there, which is completely amazing and mind-boggling. If you're willing to support us, we'd love it. We bring you the most and the most thorough content in Marvel Snap. We do 7 days a week of videos. You might notice that this is the second video today, which means we're doing 8 videos this week. If you want more Marvel Snap content and more decks from Marvel Snap's top players than anyone else gives you, this is the perfect channel for you. Hit that sub button. A like and a comment also help us with the YouTube algorithm. Fundamentally, what that means is if you like and comment, this video will be shown to more people and we will hit our goals faster, and we'd really appreciate that. In return for subbing, liking, and commenting, we also give away season pass. We're in the process of giving away 1 a week. For the first and last week of the season, we give away 5 every weekday video carries season pass. But for the rest of the season, we give away 1 a week. So all you have to do is sub, like, and comment. I'm going to tell you what to comment in each video. Right now, I'm going to tell you the comment for a season pass is, what do you think of the high voltage mode? What are you interested in? If you've played it already, how do you feel about it? Nice and simple. Potentially, one person who subbed and comments on this video will win an Agent Venom season pass. And if you have Agent Venom, don't worry, I'll just give you a gold pass instead. All right. The first deck we're going to talk about is the Sizer Voltage deck. So for those of you who don't know or are relatively new here, Sizer is the current #1 ranked player in Marvel Snap. He is #1 on the Infinite Leaderboard. He was also #1 in both July and last December on the Infinite Leaderboard. He plays a lot of decks, and this is where he's planning on starting with this deck. Let's talk about what it does. Excuse me, fighting off the beginnings of a cold. So what this deck fundamentally does is it plays around with on reveal while being able to stop your opponent. If you think your opponent is going for big combos, you've got Juggernaut and Cosmo, which does a great job at annihilating opponents' combos. You can even go Allieth and Cosmo in order to, if you can grab priority, sort of dominate the game. Black Panther with Arnim Zola is a quick 20 power in 2 lanes. 20 power in 2 lanes, even in this game mode, is a lot, especially when you can combine it with cards like Odin. You can go Panther, Zola, right? And then if you can play Odin on top of that, you're just going straight to town. You've got a lot of big cards on the deck, so Blob should get relatively big, and then you've got your problem solver cards. Nocturne says, I don't want to deal with any location nonsense. I think there's enough banned locations that Nocturne's not going to be super needed, and Jubilee gives you an extra way to hit your combos. Hydra Bob just seems like a straight up 1/5, one of the better cards in the mode. It is going to be a wholly replaceable card in this mode, but a 1/5 without the downside of it being able to be moved when there's a snap is really, really cool. You can find Sizer at twitch.tv/Sizer2654. He streams for like 8 hours a day, and you can find me. I hang out in his stream a lot. It's a wonderful time. This deck needs Blob and Allieth. Blob is just sort of what you do with all your extra big stuff when you don't draw your combos, and Allieth is how you solve problems. Hydra Bob can be Ebony Maw. You're going to see Ebony Maw in a ton of these decks. Ebony Maw would be a play in this game mode on turn 3 because it says you can't play cards there after this turn, right? But Ebony Maw can be played until turn 3, and thus it is a very powerful card in this mode. Nocturne can be Red Guardian or Rogue, and I believe should be Red Guardian or Rogue. It could also be Super Skrull, who I think is going to be really good in this mode. And Red Hulk can be Magneto. Magneto seems super duper disruptive. All right, next up we have Safety Blade. We're going to look at 2 decks from the Great Safety Blade. For those of you who don't know, Safety Blade is one of Marvel Snap Zone's main writers. He just won the Creator Gauntlet Asia. He is an Australian player, so it's Asia / rest of the world. It was based on what time zone worked for you. Safety is an amazing player. If you've played Dracula Dump, he was the first player to create Dracula Dump decks in Marvel Snap. He's also notable for creating Slayer Blade, which was the scourge of the meta at the start of the summer. It is a Cannibal Professor. It was that Cannibal Professor X Ravonna deck that was all over the place. That was a Safety original. So Safety Blade is going to begin with this keep to 1 lane please deck, where he's going to try and sort of stack up 1 lane, guarantee himself a win with cards like Iron Man and Onslaught, and then steal that other lane in various ways, using Cosmo, using Goliath, using Havoc, that because losing 1 energy means that you should just relatively easily, if you see him right away, be able to get a 12 power Havoc out and steal that extra lane with those cheaper cards, while Iron Man and Onslaught should be fundamentally insurmountable in one of the lanes. Really, really cool idea. Very simple, very straightforward, and honestly relatively cheap. You do need Eliath and Havoc for this. I think Eliath is going to be a key card here. Jeff can be White Widow or Medusa. I'm reasonably convinced that White Widow is going to be once again great in this mode, as people will not be filling every location, even with all their energy. Medusa is just a decently good 2-drop that gets some solid power if you don't want to run Jeff. You do you can find Safety on twitch.tv/safety, but we'll do that next time. And then Ms. Marvel can be Omega Red. Omega Red obviously is really, really strong in an Iron Man Onslaught lane, which you should be able to pull off with reasonable regularity. And then you've just got an extra 8 power to other 2 locations. That seems like a lot, right? Okay, next up we have Cheese Blade. This is the second deck that Safety put together, and this one is extra mean. So Electro, you might have noticed on the thumbnail, and this deck is why I think this deck is going to be incredibly, incredibly mean. On the second turn of the game, you should almost always be able to Electro and Viper if you see both of those cards, or Ebony Maw and Viper. And if you can do either of those 2 things, you win, right? The opponent can't play in that lane anymore, and then you can drop whatever you want there and still win. And if you don't see that combo, you have War Machine, you have Misery, you have plenty of other ways to win. You have Doom and Odin to go wide. You have a Hood to chuck at them. You've got Eliath to mess with things. Infinite is questionable here. I'm not sure if Infinite's going to work, but you do have Sunspot, right? So if you go Sunspot pass for 10 million energy, and then you can play Infinite and everything else on the last turn, that's still an absolute ton of power. You should have thrown priority at that point, so your Infinite Shang-Chi play is alive, and there's some serious threat there of winning the game. You can obviously play other cards with Sunspot on turn 1. You'll have at least 2 energy as well. So there's, again, a lot to like here. This deck should put a lot of pressure on opponents. This is one of my favorites that we're going to talk about in this video. Props to Safety for this one. And you can find Safety at twitch.tv/safetyblade. For this deck, you need War Machine and Eliath. And again, Eliath is going to be key here. War Machine is specifically important because you're running Electro, who could be a downside. Ebony Maw, who could have a downside. If people are doing this strategy, you're going to want War Machine. And you're running Infinite, and War Machine gives you an extra way to do that. This list is going to need Misery. Does not need Misery, and that can be Blink or Cersei. I'm aware that's 2 other Series 5 cards, but those are the cards you need to be able to handle your Electro. Okay, next up we have Ekmadi's Voltigeb. Ekmadi is a top 10 ranked player right now. He's a Brazilian player, one of the best players in the world, and he's trying to discard opponents' stuff, largely with Moon Knight and Black Bolt. If all your opponent has is very powerful stuff in hand, Moon Knight and Black Bolt seems incredibly strong. That Black Knight shard that is protected from a Shang-Chi seems really strong. You should be able to get back your Infinite, etc. Ebony Maw is just really good. If opponents are running all high cost, high power stuff, Morph seems incredible. This deck basically says I've got card advantage and enough power to win. It remains to be seen if it can compete with the power of the other decks we've seen, but if it can, the disruption should be extremely strong. People are going to be running an absolute ton of 6s, and Moon Knight seems like it's going to be an extremely powerful card in this mode because of that. You can find Ekmadi at twitter.com/Ekmadi. This deck needs Black Knight, and it is otherwise super cheap, right? None of these other cards are high series. I'm triple checking. But yeah, just Black Knight, 1 Series 5 card. Everything else here is Series 4 or low. Series 3 or lower, so you can easily afford to play this deck. Morph seems like the ultimate sleeper in this mode, just for the record. All right, next up we have Ava, another Brazilian player. He went 5-1, making the cut in the Creator Gauntlet, and is one of the best players in the world. He's sat at number 1 on the Infinite Leaderboard multiple times. Genuine top player and very kind person. He has a deck that's just saying, I'm going to combo off, and if you can't stop my combos, there's nothing you can do about it, right? So if you can go Symbiote, Spider-Man, Black Panther, you've got a million power thing, right? The only thing that's really going to beat that 90% of games is Shang-Chi, and then you have Null to take care of that, and Zola to take care of that, and that's fundamentally what this deck does. It says, I can go off in ways that you can't worry about. Hell, I could even Jubilee, and if I hit a Panther or Symbiote, do it again into Misery, and then I can Null Zola. Null is just the biggest thing, and that's what this deck wants to do. There's a million ways to get that big thing, whether it be Null or Panther in this list, and then there's ways to find those cards with like Blink and so on. I think this one's going to be really cool. My one big worry here is Symbiote Spider-Man is a dangerous, dangerous card if people can Magneto you, but outside of that, I think this is going to be really cool and really, really strong. So you can find Ava at twitch.tv/Avazord. You do need Misery here. It's the Null combo. Why did I say Cersei? You need Blink here in order to get your combos. And what the hell did I say Cersei for? Who knows? Oh, I just have sort of an old deck in here. All right, either way, this should be fine. Please note if you can if you know your Panther or Symbiote thing is going to get destroyed or you're Miserying it yourself, if you can Misery that and wave on the second turn of the game, right? You can Null in Zola at the end of the game, almost guaranteed, and then you probably just win, right? Like there's very few things that are going to beat that. This is the go over the top list of all of the go over the top lists. Obviously, there's some fear of Alioth here. This is why I think Alioth is a requirement for so many of these lists. Next up, we have Barzy. Barzy has been in the top 5 for the last like 4 or 5 seasons. He's one of the best players in the world and a genuine friend of mine, kind person. Barzy has he called this Barzy High, which is saying, what if I just generate the cards I need? I can play the tech cards, right? I can play the Shang-Chi. I can play the Killmonger. I can play the extra tech cards. I'm not sure if Killmonger makes a lot of sense here. I can play the Shadow King. But then you've got Nick Fury and you've got Agent Coulson to give you the cards you need. This deck is going to thrive on being unpredictable. Your opponent's going to try and go big certain places. You should be able to counter them with your other cards, and then you should have your own big cards just because you can generate and create them. This is a really cool idea. Again, I'm not sure if this can generate enough power to really compete with the other decks we've seen, but if it can, this is a great place to look. You can find Barzy at twitch.tv/Barzy. There's like 9 Ys there. Alioth is the only high series card here that is needed. Again, I think this is Alioth's game mode. All right, next up we have Barzi's Zoltage. This is the Zoo version of Barzi's list. I think this is a really, really cool idea that's definitely worth checking out. I don't know if you know this, but if you can get Blue Marvel or Khazar with 1s and then you can Gilgamesh, that Gilgamesh is like 27, 28 power. That's usually big enough to win a lane. Can another lane be won by Super Skrull, Shadow King, Mockingbird is going to be the question. If so, this list seems like it's going to be really great. Is Gilgamesh enough big power here? Can you get the other cards big enough, consistently enough to work? I don't know, but this is a real deck that we're trying in this mode, and I'm very curious to see if real decks, given that we have the same energy just over a different number of turns, can end up being competitive, can end up being worth trying in this game mode. All right, so you need Gilgamesh, Marvel Boy, and Mockingbird for this list. Except Marvel Boy is not here, and I'm just imagining things. You need Gilgamesh and Mockingbird here. I would like Marvel Boy, but I would also like more 1s here over Kate Bishop. Kate and Hydra Bob can be Hawkeye, Iceman, Zabu. You can also feel free to just add your own damn Ebony Maw, because you can play Ebony Maw on another card to end the game just fine. You should be able to find that extra energy without too much trouble. Next up, we have W. Sorry, again, fighting off the beginnings of a cold. W has a Patriot list. W is one of the best deck builds from Marvel Snap. I'm not going to list everything he's ever made, but he made, what did we call it? The She-Hulk Doom wave list from way back when. He made one of the best Professor X Thanos lists that took over the meta. He made the Guardians Clog, the Storm Alioth list. That was one of the best lists in the game for a while. W has broken the game multiple times, and let's see if he's capable of breaking this mode. So instead of going with Zoo, W's idea here is to go with Patriot. Basically, the idea is if you can get Blue Marvel, Khazar, or Patriot with Onslaught, you can compete in size with anything, and then you're just putting enough power all over the board from Onslaught and Doom that your opponent has to really, really go off to beat you. If your opponent is really, really going off to beat you, the way that they're fairly likely to do that is with their own ongoing cards, and then Super Scroll answers that. I think this is a genuinely fantastic idea, and I'm very curious if this is enough power to really compete. This is also our only entire Series 3 deck. We have one that's closed with just Black Knight, but this is an entire Series 3 deck. You can find W on Twitter at twitter.com/WMarvelSnap. W is kind enough to make us 2 decks. The other deck is the one I'm starting with. W's Voltage Thanos seems incredible. If you're going to give me 4 cards and then I'm going to draw 2 a turn, odds are I can draw into something with Thanos. On the second turn of the game, I'm guaranteed a big body on Thanos that I can play. If I can find my Lockjaw, then this deck feels damn near unbeatable. Lockjaw should feel like cheating in this mode, where I should have fundamentally no problem being able to put crap into Lockjaw and guarantee myself a lane and go over the top of basically everything. And if I can go over the top of everything, then Goliath and Blob should win me another lane without too much trouble. So should Shang-Chi, so on and so forth. I think this list is wildly good. This is also going to be the most expensive. W gave us the cheapest and most expensive list. You're going to need Blob, Bachmur, Goliath, Thanos, and Scar. That's 5 Series 5 cards. I think Red Hulk can be Arrow, because that'll still make Scar cheaper and give you a little bit of control. Culping can be Crossbones, and Kyra can be Armor. That is the changes for this list. But this is the first one I'm playing. This type of Thanos was the best deck in the game multiple times. It is the biggest thing. I'm curious if it can just continue to be the biggest thing. Thanos starts in hand, you draw 3 more cards, and you just say, let's go. Let's see what we can do. Very, very curious about this one. All right. Then we have Derek's Voltage list. Derek was the #1 player in the last 2 seasons. He was the #1 player in both August and September, one of the only 2 players to ever be #1 back-to-back. He is our last top player list. Derek is playing a control list here, fundamentally saying Cassandra Nova should be able to get relatively big. If you play Cassandra Nova early, she's going to be a 10 power card. Baron Zemo, with everyone playing a bunch of expensive cards, should just be an easy 3/5 that's going to pull another big card. Copycat should be able to copy, like an Goliath, copy Shang-Chi, so on and so forth. And Leader should be able to copy something big if you know what your opponent's playing. So this is saying I've got all this control over what my opponent's doing, and then I have my own power cards to win. Derek is really, really great at counterpunching the meta. A lot of his success throughout the history of Marvel Snap, throughout especially the past 2 months of Marvel Snap, has been in counterpunching the meta, saying the meta wants to do this, and I can do that. That beats it, while also has good matchup into other stuff. So it's no surprise that Derek brought that same idea here. This deck needs Zemo, Cassandra Nova, and Goliath. Iron Lad can be Iron Man. Ms. Marvel can be Omega Red, and Copycat can be Morph. Those are your likely changes here. Cool. Finally, we have what I'm going to try. I'm going to try this Tribunal list. I would like it if I could draw Tribunal. I feel fine, but I also have Jubilee, so I'm going 9 cards instead of fewer. Onslaught is actually the key card here. Onslaught plus Omega Red, Onslaught plus Miss Marvel, Onslaught plus Iron Man, Onslaught plus Sarah just gives me the ability to go off in a way that I think is going to be really, really strong. I fully plan to start here unless Super Skrull is all over the meta. If it is, I'll have to go back to the drawing board. But if Super Skrull is not all over the meta, I think that my ability to go sort of nuts here is going to be crazy. I know Zabu seems strange, but if I can get Zabu out at all, right? Like I'm gonna draw 2 cards, and if one of those 4s is now a 3, the extra ability that gives me is just through the roof in terms of power, and I think that's great. That might want to be Ravonna, but I'm not sure. Hey, that's this YouTube, youtube.com/SnapJudgmentsPod. If you're willing, please hit that sub button. You need Tribunal and Lad for this. Zabu can be, and maybe should be, Ravonna. Ms. Marvel can be Claw here. Cool. That is our decks. So now what we're going to do is our friend Scott, who you can find on Twitter at ScoDenim or on SnapFan at ScoSco23, made a list of cards that he expects to be way better, a little worse, and way worse in this mode. So I wanted to take a quick look and talk about some of these cards that get much better in high voltage. So Sunspot, right? It's very unlikely that you can spend all your energy, so that card just seems like it's going to be incredible. Hydra Bob and Ebony Maw are likely great because you can mitigate what their downsides would be. Havoc as well works just like Sunspot, whereas you would not want to lose that energy. Here, gaining that energy is awesome. Loki says, I get my opponent's deck, right? I don't have to spend a whole turn doing it, and now I get random extra energy while all my stuff is cheaper. That seems great. Um, Titania has the same power sort of as Hedge Robin and Mima if you're losing Prio, but also can help you clog the opponent. Maximus on turn 3 is just a nice 2/6. Coulson generating cards. Swordmaster just being huge, and especially being huge at that point in the game. Moon Girl saying I've doubled things up. And then Sasquatch to make things cheaper. All of these get much better, along with plenty of other cards, but this is a good sampling of how cards' context will change in this mode. These cards are slightly better, and I think I actually disagree with one of them. I think Cassandra Nova gets way, way, way better. But Mirage seems really interesting here. I'm really curious for Mirage, in that when you play Mirage, you get their lowest cost card with +2 power. Odds are they played all their cheap stuff early, so you're very likely to get a powerful card with more power from them. Kang has value here, not as much value, but knowing what your opponent's output range is going to be really important in this mode, and you're very likely to play Kang the turn you draw him, which means Kang could be a deck thinner, an extra draw. We could finally have the Kang mode here. Sandman seems like it's a little better, just sort of messing with the 5s that they want to play. Adam Warlock for draw. I don't agree with Elektra, but that's fine. Blink, because you should be running so many high cost cards. Doom to really challenge multiple lanes, and Red Hulk because again, people will have a ton of extra energy. And if you draw that Red Hulk, it's going to be reasonably big. Although we are capping how big it is at turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 at I mean, I guess it's still at 6/19, right? So there's a lot to like here with these cards. Coulson maybe on both lists. Let's not worry about that. All right, cards that get slightly worse in high voltage. I think a lot of these get more than slightly worse. You just don't have time to move Werewolf enough with this. You can try and build it, but Werewolf requires you to build a lot around it, and that makes it fairly worse. Thena, are you playing exactly 2 cards? Like, who knows what your energy cards are going to be, what your curve's going to be. Pixie, unless you draw it exactly on turn 1, is significantly worse. Master Mold, they're very likely to just be able to play and be happy to have those Sentinels. Agent Venom, you don't want that kind of cheap deck. Everyone's just going too big. And then Apocalypse, any combo deck like Apocalypse is really going to struggle. And then the cards that are so much worse, Electro, unless you're giving it to the opponent, right? If you have the extra energy, taking the limit from Electro is bad. You don't have time to destroy Deadpool enough to make it good, or do any silly Daken or Thor combos, or Mr. Negative combos. Combo cards really struggle here, which means Jane's going to struggle, the other combo enablers. Supergiant, to say you can't reveal it till the end of the game is, I mean, you only have 1 turn to use that. If you don't play that on the first turn, you play it on the second turn. Great, that's when the game was going to end anyway. Symbiote Spider-Man with Magneto all over the place. Infinite, you have to skip a whole turn of all your bajillion energy, so unless you have Sunspot, that's a problem. And then you just don't have time to destroy things for death. The context of cards is fundamentally changed in Marvel Snap based on this mode in a way that they're not for Deadpool's Diner. Deadpool's Diner, the best decks were the best decks. You just had to play more consistently and more tightly. For this is an entirely different game, and that context is going to change great cards and powerful cards to being some of the worst cards in Marvel Snap. Thena, who is one of the most valued and powerful cards, is a card you absolutely, almost certainly do not want in this mode, and that is a huge change. All right, time to talk Agony. Agony is a 1/2 Series 4 3,000 token, not Series 5 6,000. Please excuse me. There have been so many Series 5 cards in a row, I forgot that they could release a card into Series 4. So after you play a card here, merge this with it. This is not non-reveal, so it will happen after location abilities. That's worth knowing. But it should, I believe, still work with cards like Iron Fist and so on. It should be absolutely incredible with Deadpool. It gives you a level of targeting because it's the next card you play there that Hulkbuster doesn't, while being only 1 power less and half the cost of Hulkbuster. So I think that most decks that run Hulkbuster are instead going to run Agony. I think this is going to be a really good card. I think it particularly wants to be played with Human Torch, Human Torch, Deadpool, and Multiple Men, and most other decks would rather run other cards. This will not work like Forge on a Brood, for example, because the on reveal will happen before the card ability, and the location will happen between the two. So it is not great for that kind of deck, but anything that's running Deadpool really wants this. Anything that's running Human Torch and or Multiple Man is really happy to have a card that they can casually and calmly play on turn 1 for extra power that will soon be Shang proof, although not Shadow King proof, that will soon be Shang proof, not strong proof, Killmonger proof, and then be able to be used otherwise. I think Agony is going to be a very good card, if not meta breaking or meta defining. And as we talk about Agony, I'm going to talk about a deck that I've been loving that I haven't had a chance to feature. So Big Baby sent this to me a couple of weeks ago, but Clog was the meta, and so this deck sort of fell apart. This deck could not beat Clog. It had Hulkbuster in the Agony spot, and what it wanted to do was either make two huge movers, right? It can do the big Human Torch, and then the big either Dagger or Vulture and win 2 lanes that way. Or it could make a stupidly big multiple man and just put those all over the board with Doctor Strange and Heimdall. And obviously Madam Web. So Aranya, Agony, and Symbiote Spider-Man can combine to make a 4 plus 7 is 11 plus 3 is 14, a 14 power multiple man that can be dragged and punched all over the board. You can get 1,000,000 copies of those, and spoiler, that's enough power to usually win games. If there's no Clog, this deck is very hard to disrupt and thus really, really powerful. You can also just make a big Human Torch much more quickly. Agony will work the same basic way as Aranya here, where what you would do is often you would play Aranya on turn 1, and then you would play like Iron Fist and Human Torch, or Human Torch and Ghost Spider while triggering Aranya on the next turn. Well, you can do that with Agony now on turn 1, and you get the same basic. You're losing 1 extra move, so it's not as good, but it's still pretty damn solid as a way to buff that Human Torch. In a pinch, you can buff anything, right? An extra 2 power is not bad, but those are your key targets. Being able to trigger them is absolutely incredible. You can find Big Baby on various top player streams, honestly. He finished in the top 5 of the Infinite Leaderboard last season. He goes by the name in-game of Dr. Stinkfartson. This deck needs Ghost Spider, Aranya, and Madam Web. They are non-negotiables. Symbiote or Agony can be Hulkbuster, but I believe you need one. I think you honestly probably need Symbiote, but it's close enough that I'd be willing to try it with Agony and Hulkbuster. I don't think this is the tier 1iest of tier 1 decks. I don't think that's where Agony goes. But I think this is going to be good and powerful and be able to steal cubes because it is going to be confusing and really fun to play. So if you like move, this is where to go. All right, so turn 1, you want it on your Agony. Turn 2, you can either drop Torch or Multiple Man into those cards, or you can play Madam Web. Turn 3 is the same basic concept as 2, except now you can drop a Vulture onto a Madam Web, or if you have a Ghost Spider, you can drop a Vulture in order to set up Ghost Spider next turn. Turn 4, however, is very often Symbiote. Symbiote on Torch with 1 move is now an 18 power Torch, which is enough to win many lanes. Symbiote Spider-Man on Multiple Man is now 10 power that you can move multiple times. It's very easy to get at least 30 power out of that play. Turn 4, Symbiote or get Vulture moving. Turn 5 is Strange to set up a second or third mover, and then turn 6 is usually Heimdall. But if you haven't Stranged yet, sometimes it's just like a Doctor Strange to pull a bunch of multiple men into a lane that looked like you weren't threatening, and then you can win that way. Really cool list and one worth trying, and I'm really excited. I'm gonna, like, the second I get Agony, this is the deck I'm building and the deck I'm playing. All right, that was our high voltage preview. Hopefully you're willing to try the decks. Hopefully you get Agony and are able to try this deck and you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to hit that sub button. Certain tiers of support on our Patreon, though. We have a Patreon come with on-air thanks. Our $10 Patreon's going to thank you in every video. I'm going to say thank you to these people quickly because 2 videos tonight means a lot to do. So I'm going to say thank you to Abigail Giesland, Mandatory Burnout, Irregardless, David G. Wingfield, Direwolf, LAB, FaThorNewman, Good Dog Gamer, Inc., I Am Frostman, Jay Neverate, Corwin, Primed Ryan, Ryan Burke, Caretix Lee, Koire, Black Dahlia, Pyrophoros, The Goat Seeker, Denman Falcon, Archangel 3K, Hollowed, Quid Pro Joe, The King of New Marvel Snap Card Content, Docky, Fat Nick, Mr. Kerfuffle, Ginger Prime, Philip Rakovich, Haplo, Kenny Loggins of The Danger Zone, Rob Silverman, The Bizza, Extras V, and Skippy G, Tommy Nyquist, King of Bros, The Great Kazoo, Jessica Gamble, Ryan Wood, Woody, Kevsey Hoda, Luna Chris, Quantum Quinn, John Q, and Jimmy McHugh, Clab, 8th Sage, Matza Pre-Models, The One and Only Darth Tater, Steven, Bryant Kaufman, Tristan H. Martin, Jason B., J. D. McDonaldinho, The Fuzzy Dom, Spectrum X, Hoot, Matt H., DJ Mikey Hijinks, No Frickin' Flex, Ocularis, Mr. Cricksterry, BG, Jonesy, check out the Triple Threat, y'all. 2 Ties, the Great Lord Devs, the Pirate King Tuccrr, the Homie Man, and of course, Gunny T, where the T stands for. Check out this morning's video right there. We also have a Pokemon Pocket channel, and if you're interested in that, it's at the very beginnings, because I don't want to make serious content with it until I can, like, actually spend money and really fully experience the game. But I'm starting to get good. I'm winning, like, a lot of my matches in it. So if you're interested, please check that out too. And the sub button is right below me. Thank you so much for watching this extra special Snap Take video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And I'll see you tomorrow because there's a video every day. Peace.